Hello and welcome back to the channel. Now in this video I am going to be talking you through some of the experiences that we go through, or should I say that I go through as a black African male living in the UK. I'm sure you can already tell from my thick set accent that I am in fact black African and male. So now I am going to talk you through some of the experiences that I go through. It is not necessarily a negative experience, but it is certainly an observation. So this experience I'm going to be describing to you is customer services related, and the little nuances that you notice when you are interacting with the person that is serving you as a black African male living in the UK. So, or should I say living in London, because I cannot speak for the whole of the UK, because as you know, the whole of the UK is a vast expanse. So a black African male living in the UK, an experience of customer services. Now when you experience customer services, or when I experience customer services as a black African male living in the UK, there are different sorts of interactions that I get depending on the person that I am being served by. Now let me give you an example, and before I give you the example, there are three types. Really, there are three main types. Then there are more than three types, but there are three main types of people that can serve you, that you get service from in the UK. You either get the service from a white person, or a black person, or an Asian person of Pakistani or Indian origin. Now I've made a distinction between Pakistani and Indian, and I shall get to the reasons why further down this conversation. So now, your experiences of customer services as a black African male in the UK. So and really I was inspired to record this video really off the back of a little experience I just had going down the shops just to buy a bottle of wine. Okay, so, and it's nothing negative by the way, I re-emphasize that. It's more an observation than a rant about racism. Yes, racism exists, but it's more an observation than a rant about racism. So just to be clear on that. Okay, so now you go into the shops to make your purchase, or you go into a place to receive a service. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a shop, but you go into a place to receive a service, and then in the course of that receiving that service, obviously you're going to interact with the person that you're being served by. Now your interaction with that person that you're being served by, or your experience rather of that interaction, is dependent on that person that is serving you. Okay, so I went into the shop the other day to buy a bottle of wine. A shop that I regularly patronize is just a couple of minutes down my road. So I'll just walk down, make a small purchase, and then just come back home. Now, so I went into this shop just to really pick up like a little bottle of wine, a small bottle of wine. So I picked up my wine, went to the tills, and I encountered this Indian chap, and his tone of voice was quite sharp. Maybe not sharp, more curt. C-U-R-T. He had a curt tone of voice. Now, a curt tone of voice is a curt tone of voice, and you can still be curt and still be polite. So that doesn't necessarily mean being impolite, but it was certainly there was certainly sharpness to his tone of voice. So now I use this shop fairly regularly, and they have all the garments of staff in there, black, white, etc. And usually the encounter that I have is nondescript, really. It's just an interaction of make a purchase. Here's what I'm buying. This is how much you pay. Here's the money. Thank you. Here's your change. Thank you, and thank you. That's usually the interaction, you know. So it's really something that is like autopilot. Really, it's not anything that you give any real consideration to. But it particularly struck me really that the tone of voice, because there's a tonality to the voice. It doesn't have to be high, it doesn't have to be low, but the has a tonality. There's a tonality to a voice that sends a message above the words that the voice is uttering. I'm sure you know what that means. I don't really need to explain that to anybody. There's a tonality to a voice that sends a message beyond the words that the voice is uttering. You will all know this. So now I went into this shop, had this encounter with this Indian chap. You know, he here's my purchase. He said, yes, how can I help? Here, oh, here's the money. Is that all? Do you need a bag? You know, You know, there was no, because the usual interaction with the shop attendant should be soft toned, because you are making a purchase. They want to encourage you to continue to come back, so it doesn't have to be overly friendly, because we don't do overt friendliness in this country. That's more an American thing. We don't say have a nice day in this country. If anybody said to you in the UK have a nice day, you think excuse me if anybody said to you have a nice day in the UK, you would probably think that the person was taking the piss, and they would be taking the piss, because they don't generally say have a nice day. So we don't go to those extremes, because there's a certain insincerity to the way the Americans do it, with that overly enthused customer service. We don't do that here. We just do regular British politeness, and that's really all that is required. So now, when that guy had a certain curt tone of voice, and I noticed that curtness, and I reflected on, it wasn't rude, I re-emphasize, but he was curt. C-U-R-T. So now, I reflected on it as I was leaving the shop and making my way. I was thinking, also, why was that guy so curt? And then I started to reflect back, and then it struck me that it is something really that is peculiar to that sort of chap, that sort of person. This chap was of Indian in descent, obviously. I don't say obviously, but it was obvious to me, because obviously the London experience is a mixed bag of Indian, Pakistani, black and white. That's really the mix, and then you have all of humanity here as well, but the main mix of London is those four. So really we know each other, and he knows as well if I'm Caribbean, if I'm African. Even if I'm African, he can still tell if I'm Nigerian, etc., because we all live within the same community, and we all intermix with each other, so we have a good feel of who we all are. So now, so I had this interaction with this Indian chappie, quite curt, and I was reflecting on that. And then what really struck me as a theory, the thought that I had and I rested on, was that these Indians, when they see a black chap, because I'm a fairly big guy, I'm fairly tall, just under 6 foot, broad-shouldered, you know, bald head, you know, over the thick set accent, as you can hear, you know, so it jars the senses a little bit with them, and they feel they have to toughen up, because they see you in their subconsciousness as a tough black guy, because the resonance within their own community of an understanding of a black person is some tough guy, some aggressive guy, and all the usual cliches. So the cliches that resonates in the back of his head comes to the fore in his manner of presentation, and then he presents in that way, even if he might be doing it unwittingly. So this really struck me, and then this then made me then reflect on all the interactions that I have had with Indians. Now, I've not had that many interactions with Indians because I don't really tend to gravitate towards the Indian community. I would prefer to gravitate either towards a white community or a black community, but if I found myself in an Indian community, I don't feel any sense of unease, unless I'm of course made to feel uneasy. So it's not so much that I'm against them, but it's more that I don't seek them out because I have no reason to seek them out, unless of course I happen to be in their company and I enjoy that too. And by the way, one of my best friends, one of the best men at my weddings was an Indian, Mandeep. So there's no prejudice being expressed here. It's just an observation being shared. So my encounter with this guy made me reflect on that sort of interactions with the intermix that we have within this country. And what I did find then was that if your interaction with the shop attendant, the experience that you have is dependent on the race of the person that is serving you and your race. So now, if you have an encounter with an Indian person, there's a good probability that will be the sort of encounter that I have just described. If you have an encounter with a black person, the encounter with the black person has a certain coloration as well. There's a certain there's a saying in this country that the last person that an English person wants to see when they go abroad is another English person, because they are able to predict their behavior and they have to show concern. Just the last person you want to see when you've traveled anyway is somebody like yourself, because you want to be the exotic person and you want to be so now. This is sort of a broad, if not an exact, description of an interaction with a black person as well, especially in the position of service. So sometimes some of them are glad to serve you because they see that that brotherhood thing, and another type of black person will have that standoffish kind of thing, and then that's cool too, so long as it's polite. And it doesn't even have to be polite, so long as it's civil. Then you can have the experience and complete what you need to do and just move on. You're not there to make friends. You're there to take take advantage of a service. So this is a service that you are paying for in one form or the other, either through your taxes or actually parting with money by handing over your card. So it's just an exchange. It's a service. So really, you go through the experience so long as it's civil, because the only obligation that we owe each other really is to be civil. So long as it's civil, so you have those experiences with a black person as well. But if I go for a service, my preference for the person to serve me is a white person. Because with a white person, you know what you get. With a white person, there's no real chip on their shoulder, especially when they're white and English. I should really add that proviso. So if I'm going for a service, the person that I would prefer to be served by is a white English person. Because with a white English person, you don't have that sense of they have no chip on their shoulder. They have no point to prove against you. Everybody is foreign to them, and they feel that sense of white guilt or whatever it is to be polite to you. And so long as you are polite back, that puts them at ease, and then everybody has a pleasant exchange and you move on. So they are polite to you, and if you show them any politeness back, and then it eases everybody. You are at ease, they are at ease, and then it just makes for a pleasant interaction, and then everything completes, and then you go about your business. So really, the white person, and then of course if they are dealing with their own fellow white person, there's an inbuilt politeness anyway. So it's usually a polite experience with a white British person. It might well be a practiced politeness. It might well be a level of insincerity to it, and almost certainly there is a level of insincerity to it, because he's already seen you. If you're a non-white, it doesn't matter if you were born in Buckingham Palace on the Queen's bed. if you are non-white, there's an automatic assumption that you are foreign, and there's an automatic trigger of that. I use white guilt as a broad spectrum because it's just a descriptive that people are able to identify quite easily. So it's not like a heavy guilt, but though let me not be. They want to be polite to you in order not to come across as being racist, and then if you are polite to them back in order to say that look, it's fine, there are no issues here, then they're at ease and you are at ease, and then you make for you might even exchange a couple little jokes, and then they're off on your way. They smile, you smile, and it's a pleasant experience. And that is usually, generally, but not all of the time. Of course, these are broad strokes, by the way. I am talking in broad strokes. So all of the experiences that I am describing, they are not an every instance experience. They're just like a generality that is often experienced, perhaps more often than it should be when it's a negative thing, and then more so it should be experienced more if it's a positive thing. So that's really the narrative here. So yes, it's just really, this whole video really is just is inspired, is spurred by just going off to buy just like a miniature bottle of wine with barely a glass of wine, because they have these little bottles of wine that they sell, which is just really the equivalent of just like a large glass of wine. So that's really just what I went off to buy, and that's resulted in this video off the back of an interaction that I had with the Indian attendant. Now, I said I was going to make the distinction between the Indian and the Pakistani, and there's a marked difference between the Indian and the Pakistani. Now, there's commonality between them, and the only difference between the Indian and the Pakistani historically is just the partitioning that the British put between them when they left. But the Pakistanis are more that tended to be more of a Muslim faith, and then the Indians, I think, are more of a Hindu faith. But with the Pakistanis, I wouldn't say they are more black-like, because that really there's other meanings to be read into that by the unintelligent mind. So I wouldn't want to use those terms, but there's a certain sense of of a freer association with them, because with the Pakistani person, he doesn't really care. All he's there is to collect his wage. He's happy to see you if you're okay. All he wants to know is that you're not going to give him any problems. So he's polite to you, you're polite to him, and they're more like they're polite like a street sort of politeness. Is their form of politeness. It's a flavor too, and that is again a sweeping statement. But really, it's a better interaction really with the Pakistani than for me. This is based on my personal experience, by the way. This is not like everybody's experience, and this is not gospel, and this is not set in stone, and I am not putting my hand on any book and swearing an oath on anything that I'm saying here. These are just sweeping observations of my experiences, condensed in a general statement, which might well sound cliched, but is just really my experience. Effectively, is what I'm saying. So, for me, if I'm going to purchase a service or require a service, I'd rather first white, possibly female, or in her 40s thereabouts, or older person. Failing that, then I'd rather a Pakistani type person, and then failing that, I'd rather a black person, and then if I can't get any of those, I would rather. And then of course, then I'd have to settle for an Indian person or any other type of person that was there to provide the service. But really, the most important thing is for them to be civil, because we do need to be civil, because that's what holds us as as a civilized society. So yes, a little, I wouldn't even call it a rant, an observational video on an everyday experience in London, in England, UK. Let me know what your thoughts are. Are you England based? Have you had similar experiences? What are the experiences if you live particularly in a country that has a good mix of either race or ethnicity? Let me know what your experiences are based on the different ethnicities or race that you've had to interact with, and how you've picked up on how the service or provide the service, the good and the bad. So there you have it, a short little video. It was intended to be a short little video, but it's gone on a bit. So I'll leave you here, meet you in the comment section, and I'll say peace.